Just what do you need to make it in the music business? Well, our guest has answered that question for a very diverse and successful group of entertainers. Jim Halsey joins us next on Green Country Perspectives. Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Jones. In a span of over 60 years, one man has discovered, guided, or influenced the careers of such diverse entertainers as Roy Clark, the Oak Ridge Boys, Waylon Jennings, Reba McEntire, Clint Black, James Brown, Rick Nelson, and even the Glenn Miller Orchestra. He's taken the classic American sound of country music, though, to parts of the world where it had never been before. And lately, he's focused his talents, which are many, on education. It's my pleasure now to welcome Jim Halsey. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Sam. I'm really proud to be here, and we watch you all the time. My wife, my niece, and I do. And,
well, we appreciate that.
Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Before we get into, there's no way we can compress your life into 30 minutes. But what I'd like to do, with your permission, is go back to the very beginning. And where are you from?
Well, I'm from Independence, Kansas, which is north of Tulsa, about 80 miles. And my family had a department store there for years, the Halsey Brothers department store. And my great uncle and my grandfather started it, and then my dad and my aunt continued it on until finally it was time for them to quit. But I was involved with show business. I love show business. I was a player myself. I played saxophone, and between my high school graduation and college, I went out and saw some good bands like Woody Herman, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Lionel Hampton. When I saw that type of musicianship in those bands, I knew I would never, if I lived to be 1,000, be good enough to play and make a living out of it. Mm-hmm. But I read a book for a book report in my high school senior year called Impresario. And it was written by the great Russian impresario Saul Hurok, who was responsible for bringing most of the, at that time, Iron Curtain performances over on dancers and ballet theaters. And it sounded like such a glamorous life, I decided I was going to become the impresario of southeastern Kansas.
Well, you know, you did that and more.
Yeah.
You became an impresario.
Well, and I brought everything into southeastern Kansas. But my first show was Leon McAuliffe and his Western Swing Band out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was a success. And Mr. Cooksey, Leon's manager, didn't know I was at the time an 18-year-old kid, and afterward he didn't care because I promoted it and they made money, and I continued to promote Leon for a number of years, and then eventually when I found my agency, the agency signed Leon in the band, and we booked him for a long time.
That's a pretty incredible story, and it's ironic because some of the names that you've mentioned, that there seems to be a conduit between the two of us. Leon was an old friend for years after I moved to Oklahoma, and introduced me to a number of folks who had worked with Bob Wills and his group. Where does the hook come for folks to say, you know, I want to do something with music? Who's the best guy out there? Why, Jim Halsey. Your reputation's not just in the States, it's all over the world.
Well, thank you. Well, I've just been around a long time, and I've worked, and I've one of the formulas that I always tell young people is, first of all, you have to determine what you want to do, have a goal of some type, and when you decide what your goal is, then find out who makes those things happen. Your team. In the music and entertainment business, it's made up of a lot of teams. Record companies, music publicists, booking agents, managers, press and PR people, producers, everything from stagehands, bus drivers, and everything else.
Sure.
Then you have to determine how you're going to get there. And more important than anything else is, if you want that goal, is to stay focused on it. And it's kind of like what every speaker at a high school or college commencement said: you've got to have a goal and you've got to focus on it. Well, that's true, but you have to know how to get the elements put into place. And I just recently wrote a book about it, and that's partially.
We happen to have that book right here.
This tells not only how to get in the business, how to become successful in the business, and find your niche in it, find where you fit. And there are literally thousands of creative jobs out there that it's not always the star on stage.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have that to have all the other accompaniment that goes along with it.
Sure.
But it's all those jobs that are support to
And
the
people
star.
don't realize, from the technicians, the guys and gals that handle the microphone, the sound gear, to the lighting people. Everywhere you look in the industry, there's a job.
My son Sherman Halsey is a very important director and producer of television shows and video, and he does all of Tim McGraw's NBC specials.
Mm-hmm.
But when they gear up to do a show or even a video, he did a video a few months ago. There were 125 people working on that one video, from makeup to drivers to runners to cable pullers to ADs, everything else. So in this business, and particularly in the one that I'm in, which is artist management, we find out who all those players are, booking agents, press and PR people, and we try to put together a team for an artist that works harmoniously. And if you do, you're dedicated, you know where you want to take that artist, and you want to know where you're going yourself, you'll get there.
You probably, more than anyone else, are responsible for the introduction of country music to Russia.
We took the very first show there. One of my philosophies is to try to do something first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there'll be a lot of people come along that may do it better, but they'll never be able to say they did it first. So in 1974, we realized the importance of our shows in dealing with a lot of people on an international basis, but nobody had ever gone to the Iron Curtain countries before. That was just a no-no. Roy Clark and I were sitting in the hotel in our suite in Las Vegas where he was performing, and we're watching the news, and it showed this group of Soviet dignitaries getting off the plane in Seattle. And they had been to the World's Fair, and were going to spend the time there and go on to Disneyland. And the commentator said, "Is there any place in America that you wanted to go and you haven't gone?" He said, "We wanted to go to Las Vegas, but it's not on our itinerary." And Roy looks over to me and he said, "Why don't you call him and invite him down to my show?" Now, maybe he was kind of half serious and half joking, but I said, "Roy," and pardon the pun here, I said, "do you realize how much red tape that would be?" He said, "Try it." Well, it wasn't so hard. I called the State Department the next day, and he said, "Well, that's fine. They have a day off. If somebody will pay their way and their hotel and their meals, you can do it." At that time, we were booking all the shows at the Howard Hughes hotels. Roy was at the Frontier. And I visited with the powers that be there and explained the situation. Howard Hughes owned an airline at that time. They flew them from Seattle to Las Vegas, met them at the airport with their Frontier Hotel limousines, brought them to the hotel where Roy was performing, gave them all a bag of quarters, turned them loose, and the Russians scattered like that. I thought, well, man, they're all going to defect. We'll never see them again. But they showed up that night at Roy's show, and they had a seat. There were 18 of them, and they sat in a long table right in front of the stage. And at that time, Roy was kind of a little on the heavy side, and so were those Russians, and they thought he was Russian. They loved him. And Roy Clark is probably the greatest entertainer, single entertainer I've ever seen in my life.